Hotel family, welcome, welcome all members. I appreciate all comments, questions, concerns, and or corrections. First, let me share this book. Let's see if I can get the screen. So this book is identified. This it's on the screen. Is The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, written in 1987. And this particular edition is copyrighted in 2010. I always like to share some exciting reading material, so I'll keep that particular text in mind. So as I continue to focus on our African ancestors along the Nile River, what I will do today is continue that process and look at, again, well, let me revisit this important statement. So our African ancestors, and our goal is to be able to read the sacred script of our African ancestors. Our African ancestors created civilization based on the understanding, that truth, order, justice, and balance are fundamental values of a civil society. Not typical for today. Truth is not on the menu for the most part. However, that's what our ancestors believed and worked with. They used the image of an African woman wearing an ostrich plume in her headband to represent this idea. And we've seen this image before. I've actually done a couple of YouTube videos on mods. Additionally, our African ancestors created a written language to provide a record of their belief so that future generations could find their way back if they were ever to lose their way. They used the image of an ibis bird writing sacred symbols to represent this idea. So our African ancestors were the first to create great states and cities. Again, if we recognize the Medu Neter symbols, and that's what we're trying to do. Right in the center, kind of down towards the middle of the screen, we see the Medu Neter symbol for Imenta. It's sort of a symbol of Ma'at on a loaf of bread and two vertical lines. Then we see two loaves of bread next to that. And then next to that, we see the symbol for the book roll, which tells us this is the idea. But to the right of that, we see the circle, what looks like an X inside of it. And below that, a loaf of bread with the is what it is. So the circle with the symbol that looks like a cross or an X, more like an X, is a symbol that tells us that that area is what we would call a city or some sort of locale. We also see that symbol on the bottom right, where we just see the symbol, again, the circle with the symbol that looks like an X, loaf of bread is what it is. So those are ways that we identify cities. And that symbol will come up time and time again. We also have other symbols to represent states, and I say states and cities, but those are modern terms. I came across this particular topic as I was looking through a book that I have in my library. This book is entitled The Amherst Papyri. It's only entitled that because this family in England managed to get their hands on a bunch of papyri from Egypt, either bought or somehow, I always say stolen. They say bought, But in this text, there's lots of information about different areas of localities. And I was trying to trace that information to see how it matched with contemporary understandings of that. So let's just jump right into it. So we have this symbol. If we look in the middle where we see the tongue of land, we see the bow, first of all, in front. And the bow is transliterated with the letters STY. The tongue of land at the top is transliterated with the letters T and A. The loaf of bread transliterated with the letter T. And the pool transliterated with the letters SH. And the determinative for what we are calling a nome. So a nome, it turns out to be, again, kind of a Greek word, which represents a administrative region, an area that's, I guess, in Greek terminology is controlled by somebody. Now, what happens is a lot of the areas are renamed by Greeks, or renamed with Greek words. And we get most of those Greek words coming down to us, which is how we could kind of backtrack and figure out what they were talking about. So this particular set, the bow, tongue of land, the loaf of bread, and the pool is above what's called a standard. So I was about to say standing on the standard. And that's kind of like in a parade where you have people marching and they have symbols on top of it. It's the same idea. It's called a standard. According to the book, the Amherst Papyrus, this would be transliterated as Takhen. Don't quite know how they got the Khen, so I will vary from what they transliterate in this book. But it is identified as the area known as Nubia, which kind of makes sense. There are other ways that the land area identified as Nubia is written. So we look below where it has the ideogram or determinative. So again, we have the tongue of land, we have the bow, we have the loaf of bread, and then we have the mountain, the three mountains. And that is transliterated in most cases as Ta-Seti. And we would say that as Ta-Seti, Ta-Seti. We also could see it written below. Well, it's written three other ways, but the transliteration and the translation give us the area known as Ta-Seti or Nubia. Okay, looking at some maps, it's easy to, not easy, but we can distinguish the fact that Nubia is the entire stretch of land from the sixth cataract at Aswan to the first cataract at Khartoum. So now if you look at their map, they have the first cataract at Aswan, and the sixth cataract is down at the bottom of the screen. That would be Khartoum. It turns out that, again, of course, we have these invaders who came in, and they came from the north. So the first cataract that they would encounter, cataract is simply a break in the river. So, you see these rapids, people do these riding along the rivers, and there's rapids. And so if you were on a vessel that needed to be removed from the water so that it didn't get damaged by the cataract, if you were coming from the north, the first cataract that you would encounter would be up at Aswan. But the logical movement of people is to move downriver. And the river flows from south to north. That's why we say we go down north. I'm sorry, we go up north. I had it right. We go down north and up south. So go up. If you're going against the river, you're going up the river. So, in fact, the Nubia, the first cataract is at Khartoum. And our African ancestors created civilizations along the Nile Valley in what we call ancient Nubia, which is thousands of years before the first dynasty of Ta-Meri, or what we call ancient Egypt. So again, just to clarify that, so Lower Nubia is technically Upper Egypt, right? All right, so the first dynasty of Ta-Meri, the better name for what we call in Egypt now, ancient Egypt, which begins around 3,200 years before Christ, 3,200 years BC. Uh, that begins when Narmer reunited the Lower Nile Valley and the Upper Nile Valley under one leadership, and a new capital was established at Memphis. So if you look at the map on the left, you can see that Memphis is way up near the cataracts, or as we would say, uh, down north. Remember, the river is flowing from south to north. And again, you can see that primarily the entire area that we're talking about is Nubia. And what we would consider to be Upper Egypt is, in fact, Lower Nubia. So again, another map representing that. You see, I put in those red lines myself. So if we were to kind of distinguish the areas that we're calling Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, again, Lower Egypt would be at the north because that's the lower area for the land, and Upper Egypt would be at the what we technically call the south. So what Norma did is Norma came from Nubia to become the leader of Lower Nile Valley and the Upper Nile Valley. Uh, Lower Nile Valley is, and we identify rulers of Upper and Lower Nile Valley as the Nasut Biti. Nasut representing the Upper Nile, Biti representing the Lower Nile, and Ta-Meri, I'm going to say the new name for that particular region of the world. And during the first dynasty, after Noma moves to conquer that entire region, we have, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Nasut Bitis, or 8 members of that family that ruled. You see that first dynasty is from Ta-Nehisi, which is also another way of saying Ta-Seti. So Ta-Seti, Ta-Nehisi, or Nubia, those are all the same. So from 3,200 before the Common Era, before Christ, to 324 AD, from the first dynasty to the 34th dynasty, the area between the sixth cataract being at Aswan, and the Nile Delta were primarily under the leadership of indigenous Africans, or Nasut Biti. When outsiders did capture some territory, it was primarily in the Nile Delta region. So again, just to kind of be hopefully clear and maybe repetitive. So we see the first cataract on this image, and the first cataract again is up south, way below Thebes, and then the river moves up through Abydos, Memphis, and then there's Memphis written twice, and then there's Fayum, and then we get to the Nile Delta. So the lower Egypt part, though, is the area that was now captured by Narma and became a part of the entire region. So it's, maybe we would be better say that it's the greater Nubia area. So, and we know that because we have the Norma palette, right? The Norma palette shows us Norma, well, on the palette we see Norma, but on the left-hand side, I have an image, and I'm not sure which Nasut Biti that is, but I can tell you that it's a Nasut Biti because he is wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt. I'm getting those confused for some reason. But Again, Upper Egypt is the area that is probably best referred to as Lower Nubia. So we see the white crown, and then on the normal palette, we see on the left hand the palette, we see that he is hitting someone over the head. They say that that is Scarian. That's the word that I've heard the name. And we see right above Scarian, we see the Egyptian hawk, Heru, which is kind of pulling in the nose of one of the captives. And at the very bottom, we also see some of the captives running or falling. And then on this side of the palette, because the palette is two-sided, we can see Norma wearing the red crown of the lower Nile Valley, right? And actually his name is right in front of him. That's where we get the name Norma from. And then we see those four images, well, there's five images in front of them, but four of them are carrying standards. And the front two standards have the symbol of Horus or Heru. I will use Heru most of the time on top of the standards. And the third standard has a representative of Impu. The fourth standard, I could not find a representation for that. So I'm not sure what that standard is. And at the bottom, we see that there is two apparent lion heads that are being tied together. And that's showing the unification of those two areas. Again, those two areas are Upper and Lower Nile Valley. So again, in this book, the Amherst Papyrus, he shows these names, and what we can appreciate is that the names were, well, as Dr. John Henry Clark says, the Greeks were great at renaming things. So they renamed this area Apollonia Polite, and they call it a nome, right? So those words did not exist in Middle Netia. Actually, we see in this image, this is a temple. The way that Middle Netia would identify a temple is with the mouth, with the is what it is below it, and the house with it is what it is below it. And that would identify that this is a temple. Another way to represent a temple is to put the symbol for the Netia. And to put a temple, the symbol next to the Netia is a temple. And then a loaf of bread, and a house. So that would tell me that this is a temple. Third way to do temple is, again, to put a temple with the symbol for great. And again, loaf of bread in the house. So those are three different ways that our ancestors would write temple. This particular temple is identified more correctly as, well, as Edfu, even though a better name would be Heru, Des Heru. And Des Heru is one of the earliest constructions. It began around the third dynasty. The construction of this temple began around the third dynasty, which was 2686 before the Common Era. And it was renovated during the reign of Ptolemy III around 237 before the Common Era. And it's the temple of Heru. I mean, that kind of makes sense. In fact, you see that in its name. And also it just be at the end of the symbol for Heru, we see again that circle with the symbol that kind of looks like an X in it. And above it is what it is, which tells me that that is the name of a location. Again, the Greeks call these locations nomes. There are 22 nomes in the area that we identify as Upper Egypt, 20 nomes in the area we identify as Lower Egypt. And if you look at that little image on the right, you can see where Edfu is located along the Nile River. Okay. All right. Also, I see that I have some guests, which is wonderful. I think I can see comments if you place a comment on the screen. Yes, I can. So if you want to make a comment or ask a question, I would respond. All right, just continuing along in Edfu. So this is a temple of Horus, or this Horus, this Eru. Right? I'm going to use the indigenous name. And outside that temple is this fabulous image of Heru as a statue. Heru is most often represented as a falcon, but then on the right you can see that Heru is represented as a with a human body and the head of a falcon. And his father is Usir. Usir is always represented as a human, or with a human head, I should say. And we see his mother, Set. Set is referred to as Isis, and Usir is often identified as Osiris. This is one of the first trinities. Well, I shouldn't say the first. It is one of several trinities that we know of in ancient Egypt. Moving along the Nile, further north of Edfu, we have this temple. This is the temple of Esna. Esna Temple, again, was renamed by the Greeks as Latopolite. I discovered this is taking me a little while to put this particular video together. Originally wanted it ready Tuesday, and then I started doing more research and to put it off until today. But the Greeks named it Litopolite because of the fish in the area. The fish in that area are large, and the Latin name for this fish is Lactus neolactus, something to that effect. So that's why they renamed that area fish as opposed to the temple. But it is, in fact, a temple, and another name for this is Ta-Sent. Ta-Sent. And Ta-Sent is from the 18th dynasty. It is a temple dedicated to the Necha Khnum. Khnum is the aspect of God that created man on his potter's wheel. And we can see that in this slide here. There's many, many images of this. These are two that I have. The one on the left is actually from my personal file. And then the one on the right is from the internet. So this information is available. Again, being able to follow follow the information and put it together so that it makes sense. That's the challenge, even though it is hidden in plain view. So the idea of God making man on a potter's wheel is something that is not new. I made this made me question. So if Canaan made man on the potter's wheel, so where did woman come from? It's just something that crossed my mind. But it turns out that Noon is a female deity, and Noon created everything, and Noon created all the gods. So the female created all the gods, and apparently Noon created the man. And that might not be 100% accurate, but that's what I got from this. Again, moving along the Nile, in the area that I'm going to call Lower Nubia, Upper Ta-Meri. We have this temple. This is Waset. Waset is the largest religious structure in the world. It covers about 200 acres, and it had temples built on it from about 2000 before the Common Era, all the way up through 51 BC. So not only were the Egyptians building temples there, but everyone who claimed any rule of Egypt had a temple there. The three deities that are represented there, or the Trinity that's represented there, is God Amun and his wife, goddess Mut, and their son, Khonsu. That is a Trinity that's worshipped at this area, even though there are other natures, gods, and goddesses there. The pylon in front, these two things are called pylons. Um, the pylons in front, these are the last structures added on. These were added on by what's identified as Ethiopians during the 25th dynasty, and that was 656 before the Common Era. So, what tended to happen, similar to the invasions that we're hearing about now, Russia invading Ukraine, we had people invading, uh, primarily again, invading from the north, down from the area that we now call um, Palestine, Syria, or Assyria at that time. They came down through that area, down into the area that's the uh, the Delta region, and they didn't get as far in as it's down to this area. So there was always some brothers from up south who came in, chased them out. In this case, for the 25th dynasty, it was the, the Ethiopians. And one of the things that you see in this image, well, one of the many things, is there are four cutouts on each of the pylons. Those cutouts are for flags. So flags, as we still have today, would be on those pylons. So another major temple inside of Waset, uh, and it kind of comes with the name because that name doesn't really say Waset. That is the all-seeing eye, and there is the symbol for Ra. And again, we have the loaf of bread, the is what it is, and the symbol for city. So my translation for this one, well, the translation they give is Merit Ra. I'm not sure where the merit comes from. Um, I mean, that could be Arit Ra, because the I is usually Arit. And again, we have Arit Ra, so that's would again be the name for Ra, or Amun Ra in this case, because this Amun. That's an interesting combination too, because Amun is the name of the hidden force behind the sun, which is Ra. So combining the hidden force, Amun, Amen, and the physical force, the physical representation that we see is the sun, and you get Amun Ra. And again, this is an area called Waset. Now that area has been identified with different names: Thebes, Luxor, and depending on again which invading people controlled it. I think it was Thebes by the Greeks, Luxor by the Arabs, but the original name is Waset. Waset. Also, should mention that the Waset, or the temple of Waset, the temple area in Luxor or Waset. Luxor is the general city area now that we identify. It would hold the average of 10 European cathedrals. It would hold St. Patrick's Cathedral, Rome, Cathedral of Milan, and Notre Dame would fit inside the walls of that temple. The other thing that struck me was the image of Amun Ra is shown with his left leg forward, which is a sign of a living being or a living deity. Because whenever you want to show someone living, we show them with their left foot forward. Okay, moving right along, we have this. I couldn't get images. I don't even think there are images left. Maybe I shouldn't say images. There's no temple remains left at this area. This area, again, we see the, the bird, the heru, the falcon twice. And if you remember, when you do something twice, we get the word T, or in this case, they just do Heru, could be Heru T, but Heru E works. Again, we see the loaf of bread, the symbol for a city, and it's on a standard, like we saw with the standards on the normal palette. So, but we could tell that this was a city that had something to do with Heru, because of the fact that we have Heru there. This area is also identified as Gebtu, The Greeks call it Coptos, which I thought was very interesting because that's very similar to Coptic. And later it becomes Abydos. I think it's expanded into Abydos from what I can read. Right? So the only thing that I could find was this rectangular container, and there are four sides to this container, and there's metal netture on all sides. So I did want to take a moment to review some of the images and review some metal netture because that's what we're really supposed to be trying to read. That's what I'm trying to cover, how to read the metal netture. And again, for those people who have been with me for a while, you know, right away I go for the Shinu. Right? We know that the Shinu has inscribed in it the names of the Nasubiti. So we have the two Shinu that have the name of the Nasubiti in it. And if I look this up in Dr. Ben's Black Men on the Nile, I find that this Shinu represents the name of someone that we identify well, that they call Nebin Nekken, how do I say that? Nectinabu, and he is from the 30th dynasty, and again from Thebes. There were only two of them. There were only two Nectinabus, Nectinabu the first and Nectinabu the second, and that's again very late. This is 378 to 341 before the Common Era, before Christ. So again, this is old, but not as old as some stuff. So I did want to. I did find an image of Nectinabu the first. All I could find was images of his head, nothing else. But I did want to do a little translation. Well, I always say transliteration. Translation is a little more challenging. So again, the first name is his Nasubiti name. We see the sud plant, loaf of bread, the bee, Egyptian bee, loaf of bread, and then inside the Shinu, we see Ra. We know that's Ra because we see the head of the falcon, and we see the solar disk on top and holding the Ankh. And after that, that's Amen. We know that's Amen because looking carefully, we see the double feathers on his head, and again holding the Ankh. And then we have the folded cloth, which is transliterated with the letter S. The pea pod, transliterated with letters NDJM. The heart, transliterated with letters IB. The as symbol, transliterated with the letters STP. And then we have the ripple of water, which is N. And then, well, next to the heart is it is what it is. Again, transliterating is easy. Translating is a little more challenging. But we see in his name, there is the names again of the two netures, Ra and Amen. If you combine them, it's Amen Ra. They have them separated here. And we have the heart. So again, translating is for me not something I feel comfortable with because I just don't feel comfortable with translating a name, even though I see that his name tells me something about his relationship with Ra and Amen and something with his heart. Or it could be belongs to his heart because the ripple of water kind of belongs to. Anyway, sorry, moving on. So in his Sarah name, the son of the sun name, inside of this Shinu, we see Amen again. Right? Not easy to see, but to make it out. We see the garden hoe, which is Mary, which is love. The arm and hammer with his arm in the hand with the stick, which is NKHT transliterated. And we see Heru again clearly in this case. And then we see the house with light and basin. So that's really three parts to that figure. And that's transliterated HBT. And we see the loaf of bread. And we have, unfortunately, this symbol is in the way, but there is a determinative there, which is what it is. Again, that says that in his name is the name of the city, and it's kind of the city of Horus with lights. But anyway, again, the transliteration becomes really challenging. But so in his name is the name of the city, which is, if I go back, let's see, the name of the city has Heru in it, and his name has Heru in it. Makes sense to me. Again, not easy to translations. Again, it's a lot of stuff has been hidden, even though the book that I'm getting this for with those materials in was written in the 1800s, 1890, I think, or 1892. So, people have had access to this. It's just that you're not going to find it in your history book, and it's not going to get into any college class. So it's up to you to dig it up yourself. I do the best I can. I found these interesting, these images interesting. These are clearly foreign datas, I say, from Asia. And I kind of mean, I guess, what they would call Asia Minor. Again, across, if you travel uh, east from Egypt across Sinai Peninsula, you get into the area that we now call Asia. And you can see that these are captives, but unlike the captive that I've seen before, where they're on one knee with their arms tied behind them, these have no legs, but they have what appears to be their name or a name of something below them. You see that they all come from the mountainous area, because that's the bottom of each of their names. And again, you can see that there's distinct features from what we would identify as the, the Nubians. And again, on the other side, we also have the same set of representations. I can, and it's possible to transliterate their names, even though I'm not sure whether it means their individual names or the names of the locations from which they come. So I don't know. I'd have to work on that. This image I find fascinating. These images are often on columns. We see this bird. These birds on the left and right, they're symmetric. They're the same bird, one on the left, one on the right. And they're a combination of many birds. And in front of them is a star, which is translated as worship, like Sabah. I think Sabah is what I've heard. So, and it translated as we all worship the Lord, right? And again, Lord is Neb, the big symbol below. And in between, we have Nefer, which is beautiful. And we have the nature symbols, again, symmetrically facing both directions. So we all worship the beautiful nature. And below each of those symbols, we have three bows. And the bows, again, is Seti. So that's Seti-U, because it's multiple. Seti-U meaning plural. So that's, and again, this temple is the worship temple for the nature Heru, which again is in the name in most of the symbols there. The next symbol, well, the standard on the left, it's a mountain with something on top of it. And I'm not quite sure how to describe it. I know it's a mound with something on top of it. Below that, we have the triangular loaf of bread, which is D. And I found that to be Iat D. Iat D. And again, in this book, they write it as Atu. But again, I'm not going to believe everything that I read in this book. But the name Tenterite, I did dig that up using ChatGPT. Not trying to advertise for them, but we can find stuff in this internet that can make sense. You just have to look carefully and not just go with the first thing. But Tenterite is again the Greek name for the temple area of the Nome that is identified as Dendera. Okay, Dendera. This is not the right image for Dendera. No, this is the right image for Dendera. I'm sorry, I think it is. So Dendera is a temple, and we might be able to tell that this temple has the goddess of the Neteret, Hathor, Haru. They call it Hathor, Haru. So those columns, we see the three columns on the left, three columns on the right. Those are called Hathoric columns. right? The Greeks had these also in Greece, the Hathoric columns, with the columns with the head or the image of Hathor, Heru at the top. Hathor, or is considered, again, translated by the Greeks as the goddess of love, joy, and beauty. This temple was built, this is an old temple. It was built around 2600 before the Common Era during the Fourth Dynasty. The Fourth Dynasty is the same time that Khufu was building the pyramids at Giza. This temple houses a large Coptic church. Well, it did around 400 AD. So that also kind of brought me back to the word Coptos in Coptic. It must be related. Heteru is is who nursed Heru while Aset searched for the body of Usir. So if you know a little bit of that story, Usir was murdered by his brother Set. Actually, he was murdered twice. And the second time he was murdered, Set cut Usir's body, Osiris's body, as people say, up into 14 pieces and spread the pieces along the Nile. And his wife, sister, as they say, Set, or Isis, went and found 13 of the pieces and put his body back together, except for the missing piece, which, with the help of her sister Nebuchadnezzar and Jehudi, through some special powers that they had, he was resurrected. So the resurrection of Osiris is visually presented on several temples, and at some point I will present that. Okay, kind of circling back to the east bank of the river. This is where, again, we call it Luxor. Well, the area is called Luxor. Then we have Luxor Temple, and we have Waset Temple, and this is Warit Temple. And so these names have all been kind of shuffled around. So as I said before, Luxor, the general area, is called Luxor, which is the Greek name. So the Arabic name. Thebes is the Greek name. Waset and Warit were the original names. This is an image of Warit Temple. In the Bible, this is known as No Amen, No-Amon, and reference is made of this area in Jeremiah 46:25 for those who want to do a little bit more research. This was identified as the city of Zeus, because, of course, I shouldn't say of course, for the Greeks, Amen is just was renamed Zeus. So as I said, the Greeks like to rename things, and so they renamed Amen Zeus. This was built during the 18th dynasty from 1417 to about 1379. And it has been, since then, it has been used by Egyptians, by Christians, and by Muslims. Right. So in the front, we can see three fairly complete statues of Ramesses II. And on the far left, you can see one partial, which is really just his head. There's one obelisk standing. It's an 82-foot obelisk, 82 feet tall obelisk, 82 foot tall. So, yeah, 82 feet tall, remaining obelisk. And you can kind of see the pillar where the other obelisk was on the right. That obelisk somehow got lost and is now in Paris, France, or in France. I'm not sure Paris, but it's in France. Somehow it got kind of lost. I'm not quite sure. Okay, so the next area is kind of interesting. It's again transliterated, and again I had to look up. This is what took me a while. This is look up several different names for it, because the name that they gave me did not compute. Even though Thinite, If I looked that up again on ChatGPT, it led me to Tanis, and then I looked up Tanis, and I see that Tanis, the way the the ancients would have written that, would be a loaf of bread, ripple of water, and two reed leaves, right? The two diagonal strokes, and then a stick, and that's a T and E, which we could say is Tani. The symbol again that looks like a circle with an X in it is a determinative, and we don't usually say the determinative, so we wouldn't really say Niut, but I put the Niut there just to remind everyone and myself that it is the determinative for a city. The other way to write that would be with a tethered rope and a ripple of water, which is 10. And that again tells me that this is a city. A third way, which I discovered to write this area, is Ta-Wer, where Ta-Wer means the great land. Ta land, where is always great, which just kind of makes it kind of easy to read. If easy is the right word, to read the Meadow Nature, because whenever you see that particular bird and the mouth, that is transliterated WR and is translated as great. And Ta is translated as land. So this is the great land, is Tani. So Tani, or Tanis as it's sometimes called, often called, is the burial site of Usir. Or actually, if I remember specifically, it was the burial site of the head of Usir. Now, the area that we're looking at right there is pretty old, to say the least, and pretty hard to identify any specific remains. It's just parts of something. But in the background, the wall that you can see, I think that is the back of what we would now call Abydos. So what happens in our Nile Valley is temples are built, they wear down, and another temple is built, and in the same location because these are all holy lands. And so we have temple upon temple upon temple, all up and down the Nile. Again, as I said, there are 22 um, nomes or areas where temples are in in the in upper Egypt or lower Nubia, and 20 in lower Egypt. Okay, so just to just continue with Ta-Wer. So Ta-Wer, of course, was here, as I said before. Uziel was killed by his brother Set, cut into 14 pieces and thrown into the Nile River. Set found every piece except one, and with the help of her sister, Nebuchadnezzar and Jehuti, Uziel was resurrected, and 9 months later, Set gave birth to Heru. And now Usir has dominion over the mint. And it's an interesting story from the standpoint that we still say that when you pass over, you're going to, I guess they say, meet your maker to some folks. Well, Usir was before any other story. This was a story that our ancestors had written. And as you look at the map, you can see where it was, and you see that all of this stuff, not all of it, but the majority of these events happen in the area that we would identify as Lower Nubia. Okay, lastly, because I don't, lastly, we have this area here, which is, again, the Greeks renamed the area. If you look at the symbol in Middle Netia, we see that's just Ma'at. And the symbol below Ma'at, I could not get a good read on that. It's supposed to be two fish back to back, and I could not, again, I could not get a good read on that particular symbol. But I know the symbol above is Ma'at. I see the loaf of bread, and again, the symbol for the city, and the standard that, again, as I would say, as people paraded they would have the standard to identify that nome or that area. Uh, the symbol in the middle that we can see of the female with the two feathers on her head, that is a set. A set for the Romans is the same as Venus. So a set becomes Venus. And we actually see another statue. It's kind of hard to see, like almost directly in front of the statue of Aset is a light colored statue to the right of the tree. It's kind of broken. And if you think of images of what they call like the Venus de Milo logic, well, that's probably a much older representation of what we would identify as a Venus de Milo. But again, the book was, the book that I used in terms of identifying some of the papyri, the amorous papyri. It's helpful. It's always good to have some resources, but you always have to just go back and dig and dig and dig. And this did take me a little while. And hopefully, it made some sense to people, and hopefully, I can feel that I've done something worthwhile. Let's see if I could get myself back on the screen. I think I can. All right. So I'm going to bring this to a close. It's a it's a work. It's a work in progress, but it's a work that I enjoy doing. Uh, of course, one investigation leads to another, and another, and another. And this is not even the video that I was planning to do. It's just something that kind of caught my attention. I want to do it now. So, all right. So I can end this. If there's any questions, I don't see no one posted anything. I did see some people that were watching the video. I do appreciate your time. And again, if you have comments, questions, suggestions, I totally would appreciate that. It would make this a little bit more. What's the word? I would appreciate it. Let's put it that way. So I think I have one last slide that I didn't show. And of course, it's this slide. And yes, so here we go. So I should always say, Shem Hotep. I look forward to all comments, questions, concerns, and or corrections. You could simply comment on the video, or if you feel like it, you can email me at iamallafrin@gmail.com. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. It's been a pleasure.